There is a particular kind of courage required to speak the truth about legends. Not the courage of a revolutionary or a whistleblower, but something quieter, the courage of a witness. Ron Howard has spent more than 6 decades inside the machinery of Hollywood. He arrived as a child actor, grew up on the sets of American television, and eventually became one of the most decorated directors in the history of the industry. He has made films that celebrated human resilience, that told stories of courage and redemption, that asked audiences to believe in something better. And through all of it, he watched. He listened. He learned that the world producing those stories of nobility could be, behind its gilded curtain, extraordinarily cruel. In various interviews and reflections over the years, Howard has spoken carefully about the shadow side of Hollywood's so-called golden age. That glittering era, roughly spanning the 1930s to the 1960s, when a studio system ruled supreme and certain names became synonymous with the American dream. His observations are not those of a sensationalist. They're the quiet reckoning of a man who loves cinema deeply enough to be honest about the people who made it. And what he found, when he looked closely enough, was a pattern. Fame functioning as armor, power operating without accountability, and an industry willing to protect its most valuable assets at any human cost. These are 6 figures from that era whose off-screen conduct stood in brutal contrast to the characters they portrayed. Their stories are not gossip. They are documented history, a reckoning with what Hollywood chose to ignore. Before James Dean reinvented cool, before Steve McQueen owned danger, there was Errol Flynn, the ultimate swashbuckler, the man who seemed to have invented the idea of effortless, reckless charisma. Born in Tasmania in 1909, Flynn became a household name almost overnight after his starring role in Captain Blood in 1935. By 1942, he had made 19 films and was, by virtually any measure, the biggest movie star in the world. That same year, 2 teenage girls came forward. 15-year-old Peggy Satterley alleged that Flynn had assaulted her during a yachting trip aboard his boat, the Sirocco, after spiking her drink with alcohol. 17-year-old Betty Hansen alleged she had been assaulted at a party at a Bel Air residence. Flynn, then 33, was arraigned in October 1942 on 3 counts of statutory rape. The trial that followed, running from January to February 1943, became one of the most sensational legal proceedings in American history. It lasted 21 days. The jury deliberated overnight and returned a not guilty verdict. The acquittal did not come from a lack of seriousness in the charges. It came from the full weight of the studio system crashing down behind the defendant. Warner Brothers hired the most elite defense lawyers money could buy. The accusers were systematically discredited. Flynn's public persona, the lovable rogue, the charming adventurer, worked like an invisible shield in the courtroom. He was acquitted. His star did not even dim. Instead, the phrase "in like Flynn" entered the American vernacular as slang for effortless success. For observers like Ron Howard, who have studied this era closely, the Flynn trial became a defining document, proof that Hollywood had constructed a system capable of protecting those it valued most, regardless of what they had done. Flynn's personal life continued its downward spiral after the verdict. He died in Vancouver in October 1959 at just 50 years old, his body ravaged by alcohol, cocaine, and decades of excess. His autopsy cited heart failure, cirrhosis of the liver, and a catalog of organ damage. The machine that made him could not save him from himself, but it could, and did, save him from justice. Kirk Douglas was, by any conventional measure, a triumph. Born Isser Danilovich in 1916 to impoverished Russian immigrant parents in Amsterdam, New York, he clawed his way up through poverty and discrimination to become one of the most powerful actors of the 20th century. His performance in Spartacus in 1960 made him a global icon. He is also credited with helping to break Hollywood's shameful blacklist by publicly insisting on giving screenwriter Dalton Trumbo credit for the film. But within the industry, those who worked alongside Douglas describe a man consumed by the need to dominate. Not just scenes, but people. The rage was not a character he left on the set. It traveled with him. Crew members, co-stars, and directors spoke of sudden explosions of temper that left people shaken and afraid. Stanley Kubrick, who directed Douglas in Paths of Glory and Spartacus, reportedly described him as the most driven man he had ever encountered and the most difficult to control. A remarkable statement from a director not known for tolerating difficult personalities himself. Then there is the darker allegation. In November 2021, Lana Wood published her memoir Little Sister, My Investigation into the Mysterious Death of Natalie Wood, in which she accused Kirk Douglas of sexually assaulting her sister Natalie in the summer of 1955 at the Chateau Marmont Hotel in Los Angeles. Natalie Wood was 16 or 17 at the time. Douglas was in his late 30s. According to Lana Wood, their mother had arranged the meeting hoping Douglas could open professional doors for the young actress. Lana writes that when Natalie returned to the car that evening, she was visibly distressed and disheveled, and whispered urgently with their mother. Years later, Natalie confided to Lana directly, "He hurt me, Lana." Douglas was never charged. He died in February 2020 at the age of 103. Rumor had been so persistent that when news of his death broke, Natalie Wood's name began trending alongside his on social media within hours. Douglas never addressed the allegation. The industry largely looked away. His honorary Oscar in 1996 was presented amid standing ovations. The applause, for some, rang hollow. Not all of Hollywood's darkness wore the face of physical violence. Some of it dressed itself in perfectionism, in artistic temperament, in the language of high standards. Faye Dunaway was born in 1941 and became one of the most luminous screen presences of her generation. Her performances in Bonnie and Clyde, 1967, and Chinatown, 1974, are studied in film schools to this day. She was nominated 3 times for the Academy Award and won once for Network in 1977. But within the industry, her name became synonymous with something far less celebrated. Crew members on her productions described a working environment defined by fear. Assistants were allegedly screamed at, humiliated, and treated as disposable. Director Frank Perry, who helmed Mommy Dearest in 1981, reportedly considered abandoning the production more than once because of Dunaway's behavior on set. The bitter irony was not lost on observers. She was playing Joan Crawford, a woman whose own legend was built on domestic cruelty, and allegedly embodying that cruelty in real time behind the camera. Co-star Retanya Alda later described the atmosphere on set as one of constant dread, everyone waiting for the next explosion. Her former manager, Jay Bernstein, once said that Dunaway did not simply play divas, she became them. By the 2000s, her reputation had made her effectively unemployable in much of the industry. In 2011, she was fired from a Broadway production of Tea at 5. In 2017, she was involved in the now infamous Oscars La La Land / Moonlight envelope error, appearing confused, overwhelmed, and visibly diminished from the goddess who had once ruled Cannes. Ron Howard has noted that the lesson from Dunaway is not about talent, which she possessed in extraordinary abundance, but about what happens when the pursuit of excellence becomes a justification for treating other human beings as obstacles. The brilliance was real, so was the damage it left behind. Few names in cinema carry the mythological weight of John Wayne. Born Marion Robert Morrison in 1907 in Winterset, Iowa, he became something larger than an actor. He became an ideology, a symbol of American strength, self-reliance, and patriotism. He appeared in more than 150 films over 6 decades. He won the Academy Award for Best Actor for True Grit in 1970. His face appeared on postage stamps. Airports bear his name. And in May 1971, he sat down for an interview with Playboy magazine that revealed, in his own words, what lay beneath that myth. In that interview, Wayne declared that he believed in white supremacy until Black Americans were, in his phrase, educated to a point of responsibility. He spoke of Native Americans as having been selfishly trying to keep their land when settlers arrived, adding that he felt no guilt about what had been done to them. He made contemptuous remarks about gay people, dismissing films like Midnight Cowboy as perversions. These were not comments taken out of context or subtly misread. They were direct, unapologetic expressions of a worldview rooted in racial hierarchy. When the interview resurfaced and went viral decades later, California lawmakers called for his name to be removed from Orange County's airport. USC removed an exhibit honoring him from its film school. On set, Wayne's cruelty was reported to be less ideological and more personal. Those who worked with him described a man who used intimidation freely and punished dissent. Actor Christopher Mitchum noted that when Wayne was angry, the atmosphere on set became physically oppressive. Women were belittled. Indigenous performers on Western sets were reportedly mocked. He died in June 1979 at 72, still widely celebrated, still unrepentant. Ron Howard grew up watching John Wayne on television, absorbing the mythology of the Western hero alongside millions of other American children. The disillusionment, when it came, was total. The hero was real, Howard has reflected. The man behind the hero was something else entirely. Someone who mistook prejudice for principle and cruelty for strength. There may be no figure in the history of modern cinema who forces a more uncomfortable confrontation between artistic brilliance and moral catastrophe than Roman Polanski. Born in Paris in 1933 to Polish-Jewish parents, he survived the horrors of the Nazi occupation of Krakow as a child, losing his mother to the gas chambers of Auschwitz. His early films, Knife in the Water, Repulsion, Rosemary's Baby, established him as one of the most gifted directors of his generation, a filmmaker who understood paranoia and dread as few others did. On March 10, 1977, 43-year-old Polanski invited 13-year-old Samantha Gailey to a photo shoot at the Hollywood home of Jack Nicholson. According to Gailey's own grand jury testimony, Polanski gave her champagne and part of a sedative pill before assaulting her in multiple ways despite her repeated protests. He was arrested the following day, facing 6 charges including rape by use of drugs. He accepted a plea bargain and pleaded guilty in August 1977 to a single count of unlawful sexual intercourse with a minor. Before sentencing, when it appeared the judge might impose a harsher punishment than the plea deal suggested, Polanski fled the United States in January 1978 and settled in France, where he has remained a fugitive ever since. What followed was one of Hollywood's longest moral failures. Polanski continued making films in Europe. He won the Academy Award for Best Director in 2003 for The Pianist, and the audience at the Dolby Theater gave him a standing ovation despite his fugitive status. He was not present to collect the award. France, Switzerland, and Poland all declined American extradition requests over the years. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences did not expel him until 2018, more than 4 decades after his guilty plea. Ron Howard has spoken about Polanski as the figure who most clearly illustrates Hollywood's willingness to separate the work from the man, to applaud the art while abandoning the victim. Talent, Howard has said, does not redeem behavior. A great film does not undo a broken life. Polanski remains in Europe, still making films, still a fugitive. The warrant for his arrest in the United States remains active.